not exist.
Makes sense. I'm obviously defending theism. Did you want me to present positive arguments, or did you feel that you had like some negative arguments that you thought were particularly robust, like, for example, some sort of problem of evil?
Well, so I think that if human A comes up to me and says, "I believe something exists, X exists," and they give a list of properties, the probability of such a thing actually existing is dependent upon the qualities that they list. So, like, if they list it's a dog, has hair and fur and stuff, and lives next door, that's rational to believe. But if it says magic or miracles or unicorns, fairies, Santa, things that have any properties that do not have any empirical basis in reality, it's rational to say such a thing does not exist. Person A made that shit up. And so it is, in the case of a god, there are a number of properties, all of which are kind of garbage: omnipotence, omniscience, omnibenevolence, outside of space and time, a mind that is eternal, all things that have no evidence, no basis in reality whatsoever. And so to believe in such things is equivalent to believe in Santa Claus or fairies, leprechauns, unicorns, etc. And so it is, from the rational perspective, justified to conclude such a thing does not exist at an equivalent basis as Santa Claus does not exist.
All right, thank you. I mean, I mostly agree with that. I think we, rationally disbelieve in most supernatural things, and God seems like a supernatural thing. So it seems like we need positive reason to believe in God, more so than perhaps werewolves, since God seems, more powerful and more magical and special than werewolves to intuitively. So I guess, the response is going to be that I propose a positive reason to believe in God that doesn't apply to Santa Claus or werewolves.
Sure.
And I guess, sorry.
Yeah, if you have evidence, that's great.
Yeah, so I guess, the first thing we can turn to is the fine-tuning argument for the universe. Obviously, there's many, you've probably heard it before, and there's many points of a, departure where you could object or point out perceived flaws. And I'll do my best to defend against all of them. So the argument for fine-tuning is that, well, okay, there's sadly more than one, but just to summarize, there are certain like physics, the physics of the universe are governed by various well-known equations, but the equations come with certain, constants that, as far as we know, don't change ever over time. They stay the same. And for some of the constants, if they changed even a tiny bit, there's very good reason to believe that, for example, molecules couldn't form, and life itself couldn't form. Again, that's something that you may want to challenge. We can go into that, but I just want to sort of summarize the argument. So the argument is that this seems like so a tiny perturbation for the value of these constants would make complex life impossible. And this seems like evidence that the universe was, in fact, fine-tuned for something like life.
Could you
And
could
this is
you explain that a little bit more? So I agree with the first premise that if we change any of the constants to a slight degree, life as we know it would not be possible. 100% agree. The next part is the part I'm not understanding, because you said this seems to be evidence that it was designed. Why would the fact that of all the different ways the universe could be constructed, this is a small unlikelihood way? How does that simple fact indicate anything?
sure. I mean, the argument is going to be on, on naturalism, the prior probability of a life permitting of constants being selected for the real values being selected is going to be very low. Whereas on theism, or at least the kind of theism that I adopt and I'm currently arguing for, it's going to be very high because the creator wants to interact with life.
Perfect.
So it's essentially a Bayesian argument where I argue the probability of this kind, the constants being life permitting is higher on the prior probability is going to be higher on theism than it is on any kind of naturalism.
All right. So here, thank you for summarizing. That's perfect. So the problem with this argument seems to be that you are cherry picking a particular kind of theism and saying a particular kind of theism, which has some kind of predisposition to create a life permitting universe, has a higher prior probability than a general kind of naturalism of all possible logically possible variations of possible forms of naturalism. Now I can, which this is a double standard of some kind, and so I can take a particular version of naturalism, let's say my particular model of naturalism, that there is some supervening law of physics that intertangles all of the known laws of physics such that they could not be different. If this version of naturalism existed, the priors would be higher than that of a god, or equivalent to that of a god. Now, of course, there's lots of different versions of naturalism. There are infinitely many possible laws or ways this law could be that could select for any of the possible variations of the ways the other laws could be constructed. And so I've picked one, which is the one I like the most because it's pretty and it has this supervening law that intertangles all the others and makes it extremely likely. And this seems to be the same thing you've done under theism, because of all the possible variations of theism, there is a possible God who would want a universe of nothing but black holes, or nothing but puppies, or nothing but tomatoes, or nothing but atoms. And so for each possible variation of the ways the laws could be constructed, there is a possible God who could want that particular way the universe could be. And so you've picked a particular kind of God, which is your preferred version of theism, and said this kind of a God has a particular disposition which would make life permitting universe more likely um, than the general kind of naturalism with no constraints. And so if I put the same kinds of constraints on naturalism that you put on theism and pick a particular version of naturalism, the likelihood would be identical.
So I agree with much of what you're saying, or at least an important kernel of what you're saying. Like there are versions of theism, or there are versions of theism on which fine tuning not only doesn't favor that version, but actively disfavors it. So, for example, if someone had a religion that's where they worshipped a god who actively hates all life and wants it to be destroyed, then the fine tuning of the argument is active evidence against that version of theism. Similarly, or conversely, there are going to be versions of naturalism on which fine tuning is predicted by, specifically by that virtue of naturalism. Like, I don't know, I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what the cosmological constant is, but if like, let's say that it's exactly, 5.2, obviously I'm making that up. If you define your version of naturalism, like TJump sub natural, or naturalism sub TJump, as naturalism plus the cosmological constant is exactly 5.2, then that's extremely good evidence for your version of naturalism. So I think we agree on all of that stuff. However, what I'm going to be arguing is that so yes, it's not evident. Fine tuning isn't evidence for theism all out, and it's not evidence against naturalism all out. Rather, it's evidence for certain kinds of theism and against certain kinds of naturalism. So what I would like to do is argue
Oh,
that
wait,
the
hold up for
kinds
one
of
second, one second. So the part I want the emphasis I was trying to make here was that, while I agree for certain kinds of theism, the ones that select for exactly the universe we see, this would be a factor that would lean towards that kind and lean against the other kinds of theism that wouldn't do that. But the same thing applies to naturalism. So the exact fine tuning we see would be equally as much evidence for the particular versions of naturalism, like my version, and against the kind that select for only black holes or whatever. And so the point of this argument is that it's equivalent. There's an equivalent basis to conclude any of the particular positive versions of naturalism and the positive versions of theism, both of which select for the universe we see. And so there's no reason to prefer theism over naturalism. None, because it's a one-to-one correlation. The general kind of theism of all logically possible gods and the general kind of naturalism of all logically possible universes both have an equal number that create our universe and an equal number that don't create our universe. And so the particular fine tuning argument that we see does not prioritize theism over naturalism, which is the point of your argument, or the main crux of your argument. It in fact indicates both equivalently. If you compare specific versions of both and the general versions of both, the numbers are exact identical.
So, I mean, part of me agrees with that, but what I was about to say is that, it seems like I may be misunderstanding the thrust of what you're saying, but it seems like, so I agree that there's literally, if you're just counting, if you're going purely by mathematical cardinality, there's an equal number of variants of naturalism and theism that both predict that both predict fine tuning and which predict, the opposite of fine tuning, whatever that's called,
Sure.
coarse tuning or something, or anti fine tuning.
Sure.
But it's not, cardinality isn't what we're supposed to be looking at. Like, we should be looking at priors. So not all versions of theism and naturalism are created equal. Some we should regard as having higher prior and some a lower prior than others. And I want to argue that the versions of theism that predict naturalism seem me, sorry, versions of theism, opposite of what I just said. The versions of theism that predict fine tuning seem to me to have much higher probability or prior probability than the versions of naturalism that also predict fine tuning.
Okay,
That
so I
said,
wanted to pause there for a second. So I'm fine to grant that, but that means that we're no longer talking about the fine tuning argument. Now we're talking about which model has higher priors. The fine tuning argument is completely contingent on this priors discussion. Without the priors discussion, purely looking at logical possibility, fine tuning tells us nothing because there's no evidence for naturalism versus theism, tells us nothing. And only if you look at this other argument, the priors argument, and only if this argument works, does the fine tuning argument have any weight whatsoever? Would you agree to that?
well, yeah, but I mean, yes and no. Like, I agree that we're talking about priors, but the Bayesian fine tuning argument is, to a substantial extent, although not entire extent, about priors. And so we're not actually departing from the fine tuning argument. We're just discussing one extremely important aspect of it, which is
Well,
what I expected us.
well, sort of. So in this case, all of the physics is gone. The physics has left the building. We're no longer talking about physics. We're talking about the priors related to the intrinsic properties of the God hypothesis versus a naturalism hypothesis. And the reference to physics and reality is completely departed. We have no reference whatsoever. Fine tuning is gone from the conversation. We're only talking about how do we establish the priors of a theist model versus a naturalist model.
Well, hold on. I disagree with that. I mean, I agree that the amount of physics that we actually need to enlist in this argument is fairly minimal, but it's not entirely gone. Like, I'm going to try to argue that based on something vaguely like a principle of indifference on naturalism, the correct way to assign your prior is such that life permitting range is really small. Now, you can argue that, that's not the correct way to assign the priors, but I mean, we're still using physics. And I'm still going to be appealing to physics ultimately because it's going to be about, you know, if we know nothing about a physical quantity, what is the right way to assign priors about it in general? I mean, we're talking about priors, but it's still ultimately going to be boiling down to the priors of certain physical constants that govern, the ability for life to form. I may be misunderstanding you.
Well, so it sounds like you're saying that of all, so there's a one.
I haven't actually gotten into my argument. Like, this is all like very pre sort of fine tuning in a sense. Like, I have an actual argument that on naturalism there should be certain priors, and those priors are going to, predict that we don't see life permitting constants.
Well, so it seems like you're saying that there is of all of the logically possible variations of naturalism and theism, you're saying that we should select a certain subset of the ones of naturalism, and on these, it's unlikely that there is some predetermined law that makes the laws of constants, the laws of physics, intertangled or something. Is that
Yeah, it's going to
correct?
be something very similar to that.
Okay, go ahead.
Great. So the idea is basically based on the principle of indifference, namely that if we have some fundamental quantity that can take some value over an interval, let's say between, I don't know, 5 and 7, we should, the rational thing to do is to be indifferent. In other words, to assign it an equal probability, for any finite subset of that interval. So I said between 5 and 7. That would mean, say, a 50% prior that it's between 5 and 6, and a 50% prior that it's between 6 and 7. Now, there are various objections to this, and I don't want to anticipate them because
Well, no, so I don't want to make any
hear.
objections to that whatsoever. I want to say that, okay, let's apply it to God too. So for equally, there are equal as many variations. I assume we're talking about the ways the
Right.
laws of physics could be, and that's the variation we're talking about. And so I would
Well,
make, go ahead.
Yeah, so I want to emphasize that there's a major, major disanalogy here between God and the versions of naturalism that predict that on which there's different constant on which the various constants of nature, like the fine tuning, or sorry, the cosmological constant, have different values. Specifically, there's no such thing. So while there are infinitely many different ways that versions of theism, but ways that God could have wanted to arrange the universe if he existed, there's not really any kind of like natural, obvious way to parameterize them in order to do the principle of indifference. Whereas
I
that
don't
that is
understand what that means. So, like, I can take exactly all possible variations of the way the natural universe could be, take all the different ways the constants could be arranged or something, and I could say God wanted that. So we have a one-to-one correlation to all possible ways naturalism could establish the universes to all the ways God could establish the universes. And so I don't see any difference there.
right. No, the difference again is that while there are infinitely many ways that God could have wanted the universe to be arranged, there's no natural way of parameterizing them so that we could like sort of say, uh, you know, there's like no single number or set of numbers that can capture all of those such that we're like indifferent over all of them. Whereas that is true on
Wait,
naturalism
wait. So I'm
for
not
the values.
understanding. I'm not understanding. So for naturalism, there
Okay,
is a
I'd
one-to-one
rather
correlation. So like
wait.
anytime.
I'd rather actually keep my sentence. Thanks. So I mean, you're looking at one-to-one correlations. You're
Yes.
looking at counting numbers of ways of things could be. That's not the right way to go about them, and I don't think that's the way that ultimately scientists use.
Well, it's just irrelevant to
To
the argument here. So the argument here is anything you apply to naturalism applies to God. So I'm just going to mirror any
No,
argument you use.
I'm pointing out specifically the disanalogy. You keep going back, let me restate that. It seems like you want to point out that there's an analogy because we have an infinite number of ways on both naturalism and theism to get both pro and anti fine tuning. And I'm saying that's completely the wrong way of looking at things. We shouldn't be counting ways things could be or not be on either theory. Rather, we should be looking for sort of natural parameterizations,
Yeah, I still
and
have no
then
idea what
looking
that
at
means. Still have no idea what that
on
means.
what measure of those parameterizations do we get one thing or another?
Again, I still have no idea what that means. So I've actually like four times. I have no idea what you mean by parameterization. It seems like you're cherry picking a particular arbitrary set of criteria and that is beneficial to your hypothesis for absolutely no reason whatsoever. So get rid of the parameterization talk. It's just irrelevant. Why
No, the
would
parameterization is completely essential, and I
no, no,
need
no.
to
Get
if
rid
I
of the
don't
talk.
understand it,
Make it
try
bring
my
it
best.
down. Bring it down to like a level that makes sense to most humans. Get rid of the technical philosophical jargon that's just irrelevant to the conversation. Here's the problem. Any amount of variations that there are the same. You admitted that, you agree to that, that's fine. And you're saying that, well, there's this new thing, this new set of parameters that we need to assess, like that differentiate the two hypotheses. What? What are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, well, I'd like to answer. I just want to note though that the philosophical jargon or the technical jargon that you refer to is although I'll try my best to avoid it, it's relatively essential, and basically all the academic debate, both pro and against fine tuning uses this. So it's
Absolutely
not just
not.
some
It's
like
absolutely
Mendelssohn
not.
detail. It's like reflecting something actually important that
No.
serious philosophers, including serious atheist philosophers, think is relatively essential.
So
So
that
let me try to
shows,
put it
well,
this
just
way,
to
however.
clarify, that actually shows your lack of knowledge in the area of philosophy. None of the jargon is actually required. The reason the philosophers use the jargon is in order to expedite the conversation because there's an agreed upon set of meanings to the jargon. When apologists use the jargon, they are not using the academically agreed upon terms typically. And so there's lots of baked in nonsense I just don't want to deal with. So
Well, that may be the case for some apologists, but I have in mind very, very, very similar, very, very, very serious Christian philosophers and atheist philosophers who use this jargon. It's not just like
that's
specific
great,
to
but
William Lane Craig,
it's
whom I
just
don't take
that
that
is not, I
seriously.
can't read your mind, so I don't care. So all I want is
Okay,
we don't need
well,
the
I just want
jargon.
to say the word parameterization is like completely universally used by everyone in these
No, no, no. I don't care
debates.
about the word. I care about what you're using to parameterize. Like, what is this criteria you are using to say that there is some parameter that differentiates God from naturalism. What
Okay.
is the parameter?
Okay. The parameter is the value of the constant, and I'm saying that
What? That doesn't
we
even
should
make
be
sense.
okay. The value of so let's take a specific constant, the cosmological constant. Okay, the question is on naturalism, it doesn't make sense to apply the principle of indifference and say that any possible value of the cosmological constant is equally likely as any other value.
Sure.
And I'm saying on naturalism, the answer to that question ought to be yes.
Okay, and my argument is on theism, it is equally yes.
Okay, what is your argument for that?
Any logically possible way God could be is equivalently as likely as any other. Therefore, they are the same.
Okay, and my response to that is that there's no single number that characterizes how God could be. Whereas on naturalism,
That
where the
makes no
buck doesn't
sense.
stop, no, please stop interrupting. On naturalism, where the
Well,
buck
wait, wait,
just
don't talk about
stops.
naturalism. Go back to what you just said because that's the important
No,
part. You
and could
said
you please
you
stop
said that
interrupting?
Let's let him finish. Let's let Mark finish.
no, I'm not going to let him finish because the focus here is what he just said was that it's not the possible variations of God are not equivalent or something, but the possible variations of naturalism are. And so I want to know why of the possible variations of God they're not equivalent.
I don't even know what that means. That's not what I said. I mean,
What
I didn't say that they're not equivalent. I said there's no single number that you could use to represent the ways that God could be. So that if you turn the number up to
I
10,
have
then
no
God
idea what that
really
means.
loves life. If you turn it down to 0, then He hates life. Like that doesn't really make a lot of sense. I can't see of any way of making that happen or making that work out. Whereas on naturalism, the buck doesn't stop with anything like God. It just stops with, the way that among other things the numbers that the fine-tuned constants are set to. Like there's nothing further on naturalism as far as I know, uh, behind the cosmological constant. It's just a kind of metaphysical or even metaphysical primitive.
Right. So again, that
And
makes
because it's
absolutely
a
zero
number,
sense. So
okay,
like
what don't you understand?
so there are no limits to what God may or may want to do, and there are some limits to what naturalism could want to do if you base it on the cosmological constant. But that is irrelevant here because the cosmological constant is not the end of the conversation. There could be another thing, another law of physics we haven't discovered yet that entangles exactly what it should be. Problem solved. There is no variation. It's exactly this one. And so just like you can make up a constraint for God of why he would want this one, you can make up a constraint for naturalism of why it would select for this one. And so it's your argument is just irrelevant. It's just irrelevant to say that um, since there you can't assign a specific number to the variations of what God could want, therefore you can't establish the probabilistic similarity. It's like, well, no, you can. It literally makes no difference what number you use if the percentage of the number is the same. So the numbers don't matter there. It doesn't make any difference to the argument whatsoever. There is still exactly a one-to-one correlation of all possible ways the universe could be. And of these, they can be explained in one of two ways, naturalism and theism. And both naturalism and theism have an infinite number that cannot be quantified of possible other laws that could do things in an infinitely many ways that can't be quantified. And so your argument is just irrelevant because you're still looking at the specific version of naturalism that we know about today, like the cosmological constant, and ignoring the addition where you're making this hypothetical omni sky daddy being with infinite properties that could possibly be variations. We can do the same thing. We can make up an infinite set of potential laws that could be behind the cosmological constant. And now we have again a one-to-one correlation, if you want to call it that there's no numerical number you can place on it. Well, we can't place it on the infinite possible variations of hypothetical sky laws, just like we can't put it on the infinite possible sky daddies. And so there's still a one-to-one correlation, and your number argument is irrelevant.
So, I mean, what you're saying is that there are certain, although as far as we know, there's nothing, further behind, our known laws of physics that's controlling the cosmological constant. There could be some further law of physics, which is, perfectly natural and perhaps even atheistic. which makes which is which A doesn't suffer from any kind of fine-tuning problem, and B forces the cosmological constant to have the number that it has, or have it in some very narrow region that's overlaps the fine-tuned region of values that it could have. I agree with all of that. However, it's irrelevant because the correct way, the correct way to assess the value of the constants is basically is going to be using the principle of indifference.
Well, here's where you're making the mistake. Here's where you're making the mistake is that it's a double standard because you're saying we're starting with the physics of the cosmological constant and saying based on just that, we use the principle of indifference to try and establish the probabilities, which I'm fine with. The problem is that when you add in the supernatural gibberish of Sky Daddy stuff, you are now going beyond the physics, way beyond. There's no physics that indicates any of that garbage at all. But in order to make a equivalent case for naturalism, you have to do the same thing under naturalism. You have to go to naturalism plus. And under naturalism plus, we are allowed to add in whatever mystical nonsense we want, like extra laws of physics. And now the principle of indifference, while it does apply to the cosmological constant in our current physics limited knowledge-based science universe, once we go beyond that to the level of the metaphysics, which with the supernatural Sky Daddy, now it doesn't apply anymore. The principle of difference doesn't apply anymore to this new naturalism plus realm, the metaphysical naturalism realm, because we're applying the same principles you are to the Sky Daddy. And so if you want to say that there is no potential numerical limitation to the possible things the Sky Daddy could want, then I get to say there are no potential limitations to the possible ways that the super laws of physics could be. And so it's just an irrelevancy whether you're using the principle of indifference to establish the current cosmological constants, because if you are allowing your hypothesis to go beyond the physics, you must allow the naturalist hypothesis to go beyond the physics. And your argument is, again, a one-to-one correlation.
So I'm trying to piece that together in a way that I can obviously I can understand fragments of it, and I think I've tried to address some of it. But I feel like there's something in it I'm missing. I mean, again, I'm agreeing that you could try to mirror the theistic explanation by positing the existence of further naturalistic mechanisms that make it likely that we get the current variation, the current value or a similar value, or just fine-tuned values in general. I'm just saying that's the wrong way to approach things, and it's disanalogous.
Well, I'd say that's exactly what you're doing. I'm saying you are doing that when you posit a God.
I mean, I'm doing that to a certain extent, but I guess what I think it would be helpful, instead of arguing in these abstracts, to move to maybe an analogy, which you probably heard before, that I think sort of illustrates this principle. So the analogy is going to be based on the firing squad. So it's a classic analogy for fine tuning. Let's say that you're blindfolded. In there's a firing squad in front of you, and they all, they're only 10 feet away, and there's 20 of them, and they're all masterful sharpshooters. They all shoot at you, and then 2 seconds later, you take off the blindfold and you realize you haven't been hit. Okay. Now you could argue that, listen, there's an infinite number of places so there's two theories. One, that the firing squad intended to miss, or two, that they intended to hit you, but just missed by pure chance. Well, on both theories, there's an infinite number of places that, that the bullets could have gone, but you wouldn't say from there that isn't evidence that they intended to miss, right?
Sure, but I wouldn't say that's a false analogy, because I would see, to try and make that an accurate analogy. So firing squad, all the firing squad shoots and misses, and you take off the blindfold. Two hypotheses. One, there is a magical leprechaun that decided to save your life and divert all the bullets. Two, quantum physics decided to cause the bullets to miss or something. Now, both of these would be ridiculous hypotheses. Clearly you would prioritize they wanted to miss, because of the properties in this analogy, they wanted to miss property is all things that have an empirical basis: brains, desires, intentions, et cetera, et cetera. And so to make it an accurate analogy, you have to add in the super daddy, Sky Daddy magic stuff of a leprechaun. A leprechaun decided to make all the bullets miss. And then contrast that to another hypothesis that a naturalist hypothesis that like something in quantum physics caused them all to miss or something, and then it would be a fair analogy.
Well, hold on. The analogy, although the analogy is, usually intended to sort of highlight fine tuning, one of the features of it I think is more relevant is to rebut one of your earlier points. Like, again, you were saying there's an infinite number of ways on both theism and atheism for, an infinite number of, say, versions of atheism and theism on which, uh, you know, the fine tuning of the universe is going to be likely. But again, that's just like a very brute, like overly coarse-grained counting, like cardinality measure. Like there's an infinite number of, all I was trying to illustrate is that there's an infinite number of ways on both the intentional and unintentional hypotheses for missing to happen. So I hope you agree that just counting number of ways something can happen on one theory versus another is not the right way to assess, which one is more likely given, the empirical data, which in the case of this thought experiment is, finding that I haven't been shot.
Well, so the infinite, to bring it into your analogy, the infinite there that I'm thinking of would be like, maybe it was a leprechaun that did it, or maybe it was a fairy, or maybe it was a unicorn, or
Right.
maybe it was a Santa Claus. And then there's different,
I mean,
infinitely many variations of quantum physics or
yeah,
something.
I agree. So in fact, so much the better for what I'm saying. Like, just on both the intentional missing and the non-intentional missing hypotheses, there's an infinite number of crazy ways for it to happen. Like maybe they intended to miss and a leprechaun stopped them, or maybe and a leprechaun and a leprechaun like move like you know so sorry, let me start that sentence over.
Yeah, I understand.
Maybe
I
they
understand.
intended,
Yes.
yeah. Maybe they intended to hit, but a leprechaun moved it out of the way, or maybe they intended to miss, but a leprechaun moved the bullets back into the way, but an invisible dragon moved it out.
Sure.
Right? You have an infinite number of degrees of freedom on which to sort of add in extra details on either hypothesis. You obviously wouldn't say that that's that's going to seriously you know remove one theory from being favored over the other theory.
Right. The infinite there wasn't the point of the argument. So the point of the argument was, when apologists bring up the fine-tuning argument, they usually have a double standard where they select a particular kind of theism and contrast that to the probabilities of a general kind of naturalism. And so if you take a particular kind of something and contrast it to a general kind of something like flowers and roses will have more thorns on average than a flower. But that statistically is irrelevant because what you need to compare is a particular and another particular. And so in the case of naturalism, if you want to say that the priors of a god are higher than the priors of a particular naturalist hypothesis, you would fail. You would get exactly one-to-one correlation. Like if I said a particular naturalist hypothesis of my super law would be more likely than general theism, like yes, but that's just trivial. It doesn't matter. We don't care about general theism. It's not a fair comparison. So the only point, the infinites there is just irrelevant to the argument here. The argument here is that you have to compare either a particular model of naturalism and a particular model of theism, or a general model of naturalism and a general model of theism. The generals are the ones that have the infinites. Neither of us care about either of those.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's ever possible to compare, a truly general version of anything with a general version of anything else. You always have to pick out specific subsets that you think have, more plausibility, and we can get into that if you want. But what I'm trying to say, what my larger point is that, in general, unless you have a reason, not specific evidence, not, specific reason not to do so, like if you know nothing about a physical quantity, you should assign, and you have absolutely no idea what determines it, the most rational thing to do is to be indifferent over its possible values. Where
Right. So
indifferent
I
means
can agree
you're
with that. I
saying
can just
a
100% agree with that.
a
That's totally
uniform,
fine.
well,
But
no,
we,
no, uniform prior probability distribution.
that's fine. I
I
agree
think
with that.
the
100%. We're agreed. So
okay, great.
So if we take the cosmological constant and the prior probabilities of any one of the possibilities exactly the same, that's great. But that tells us nothing about theism or naturalism.
Wait, hold on. So first of all, prior probability distribution doesn't really mean prior on any one value. Like for a continuous random variable, the prior is going to be
It
zero.
doesn't
Like
matter to the
there's an
argument.
infinite number of values that it can be. But
This
rather
is
it's on,
irrelevant to the argument.
you're assigning a distribution on, intervals that it could
care. I
take
don't
its
care. I
value.
don't care. You've gone way too into the philosophy weeds that don't matter. So I'm saying I can agree. Let's suppose there are infinitely many ways the cosmological constant can be. I don't care about the number. The number does not make a difference. Infinite, 10 million, 10 billion. I don't care. The problem is that this fact does not indicate naturalism or theism either way. There's exactly the same probability of both a particular model of theism explaining this and a particular model of naturalism and a general model of theism and a general model of naturalism. They both have one-to-one correlation. I don't care which number you pick.
Okay, and I'm saying on naturalism, you should absolutely choose the version that assigns equal, like on naturalism, the rational thing to do is to assign the probability distribution that assigns equal weight to all possible values. And on theism, it's not, because on specific, sorry, let me restart that. Not on theism, general theism, but on, life-friendly theism, just general theism plus the thesis that God wants there to
Right.
be
So here's
life for
the
him.
question. This is great. So why are you picking life-friendly theism, but not life-friendly versions of naturalism? Why are you sticking with the general version of naturalism, not the particular version? Why do you have this double standard? Why is there this special pleading going on?
I guess the reason is that we need it. I mean, I think that's basically the way that okay. So the reason is that I think that's how in naturalism we assess basically everything, like every other uh, assignment of priors. So for example, in the firing case, like if they were firing randomly, we would assume there'd be some, like, maybe, I mean, I don't know, I don't exactly know the shape of the probability distribution, but there would be if they were firing randomly, we expect there would be, some, like bullseye type or circular probability distribution where, like, there would be a circle of rough circle of bullets around me, right? Why would we think that that's the right, on the firing randomly hypothesis, why would we assume that that's the right probability distribution rather than a probability distribution that's like very tightly centered on the center of my chest?
So
I don't feel like
I'm
I
lost.
expressed that well, so if it doesn't make sense, I can try to sort
Well,
of
so
rephrase that.
I'm lost here. So again, my question was, why are you picking a particular kind of theism, a life-giving kind of theism, and not doing the general kind of theism? And so
Well, I mean,
what you just said
I'm not
was that if we don't have any evidence for the priors, we should establish an equal probability across the entire spectrum, which would include general theism here,
right. So
not
I guess,
life-permitting theism. And
sure. So
but
I'm not right. So the reason is that I'm not trying to defend general theism, obviously. I'm trying to
right.
defend a version of theism that's life friendly.
Right. And so then I could say I'm defending a version of naturalism that is life friendly. And so we can just forget about general naturalism. And now, how do you show that there is some statistical
Sure.
difference
And
here?
yeah, and the answer is that if you can do that, then we would basically be unable to do science, or more generally,
What?
hold on. Well, I mean, let me finish. We would more generally be unable to make any kind of probabilistic inference. And the reason I just gave, although I feel like I didn't express it completely adequately, is that we should basically be indifferent in the firing squad case as to whether they were firing randomly or not.
Okay. So I'm
Like,
not
there are going to
following
be
your
versions
logic
of
here. I don't understand. I don't understand
sure.
how, like,
There are
if
going to
I,
be versions of there are going to be versions of naturalism on which even if they're firing randomly, it's extremely likely they hit me. So why do you rule that out when you decide that
I don't, I'm
that
still
they
lost. I'm still
missed
completely lost here. So go back to the part where, so I'm saying we grant current physics in science. And I'm saying that's the starting point. And then I'm going to go beyond that. I'm going naturalism plus to a life permitting version of naturalism. And you're saying this is bad because why?
I'm saying it's bad because in almost every other case I can think of, when we see when we see uh, when we have quantities we need to make probabilistic estimations on, we attach more or less uniform priors unless we have specific reason not to do so.
Okay, I'm still lost, still lost. So there are no priors here. I'm not assigning any priors to this. I'm not saying that this is a high likelihood prior probability. I'm saying this is just a hypothesis I made up 5 seconds ago. So I'm not saying this is a highly likely probability. I'm saying It's one possibility. That's it. I don't care about the numbers here. So I'm saying, but you're saying it's bad. We can't do that. We can't make up hypotheses. What? That doesn't make any sense.
All right, which hypothesis are you referring to? Of course, we can
Naturalism
make up
selects for.
hypotheses in the sense that we can entertain them.
Sure.
But sorry, could you be more specific? I must have missed it.
All right. So I'm saying you have posited a new kind of thing, supernatural sky daddy being guy who likes to select for life, and I am positing another super duper natural thingy called the super law. Now, this is not, there's no priors here. I'm not talking, I don't care about priors here. I'm just positing a thing that I can make up just like a sky daddy. I'm not saying this is likely in physics. I'm not saying we should do this in physics. I'm not saying we should do this in science. I think this is a terrible idea, which is exactly why I don't subscribe to your version of theism. I think they fail for both reasons. So I'm not saying this is a thing we should do. I'm saying if you can make up a sky daddy explanation, I can make up a sky not daddy explanation. And you're saying that hypothetically doing this somehow makes science untenable.
Right. I mean, the principle I was trying to appeal to is that unless we have a specific reason, you know, if we encounter a phenomenon in the natural world, unless we have or rather a quantity in the natural world, unless we have some specific reason not to do so, and there's a bunch of asterisks that I could attach to this, but I want to keep it as simple as possible. You can push back later. In general, unless we have some reason not to do so, we're going to attach something like a uniform prior on the possible values. And you're saying, well, why? What motivates that? Why not just make up?
No. I'm saying we've done that. So we have walked through this step. We're done there. We've stopped. Now you have taken another step. You've taken a gigantic ass load of a step to the sky daddy supernaturalville. And so we've assessed the prior probabilities of any of these possible ways it could be are exactly the same. And then you're saying, no, I made up a sky daddy who would pick this one. Okay, I can make up a sky not daddy who would also pick this one. Now, I've done nothing with the priors. I'm not saying I've done nothing with the priors. All I've done is saying you can make up an explanation. I can make up an explanation. And so this doesn't change the priors. It doesn't affect science in any way. All I'm doing is showing the foolishness of your methodology. If you want to go beyond these priors of the possible ways the cosmological constant could be into a made up hypothesis, we can do the same thing. And I'm not saying this is good. I don't think we should do this. But if we accept your methodology, there is no evidence there for naturalism or theism because both sides can make shit up. So I don't understand how acknowledging the possibility to make shit up on the naturalism side somehow invalidates science, but acknowledging the possibility to make shit up on the supernaturalism side somehow doesn't.
Okay. So, I mean, I think I understand what you're saying. You're saying that, and you've been saying that there's a parity between the naturalism and the theistic versions or positions. Like there is a theistic version on which there's a version of, there are versions, I could say, of theism on which, choosing a constant in the fine-tuned range is very likely. You're saying on that there are versions of naturalism, although I'm not sure you've presented them so far, on which fine-tuned constants are also necessary. I think we are not necessary, but are very likely.
They're explained. It doesn't make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, sure. Yes. Explained likely, both of those, let's say. And I'm just trying to say that I think the disanalogy comes from the fact that, on naturalism, there's no any kind of independent motivation, to go beyond assigning a natural probability,
Could you give me an example? What is an independent motivation for the theist side?
Probably the simplicity. Okay, I would probably go with something like, divine simplicity usually means something completely different, but I'm going to use simplicity here. I'm going to say that, the God hypothesis, the theistic God hypothesis is substantially simpler than the versions of naturalism on which a fine-tuned universe is going to be likely. And we can talk about that, but that's the kind of thing I have in mind.
Well, so I would just completely reject that. And so would pretty much every physicist, but seems like we're departing from the fine-tuning argument entirely. We've gone to an entirely different argument. And so
no, it's part and parcel of the same argument. It's just one subsection of it.
Well, no,
But
it's not.
I mean,
It's divine simplicity has nothing to do with the fine-tuned argument. It's a complete arbitrary gobbledygook that's not accepted by the vast majority of anybody in physics. And so the fine-tuning as accepted in physics has nothing to do with divine simplicity whatsoever.
no
You have
one in
left
physics
physics completely.
Physics has nothing to do with what I was referring to by divine simplicity. In fact, I even said I'm even using it in a non-standard way that departs from the way that theologians use it.
Well, that's fine.
Like, but
I'm
yeah,
happy to
that's
grant that.
fine.
I'm happy to grant that. I'm just
You-
saying physicists
Sure.
think divine simplicity is garbage. They do not accept that
No,
as a legitimate concept in physics. It does not exist. It is fairies. It is Santa Claus. It does not exist. And
Yeah,
so if
I
we're
mean,
talking about the
as-
fine tuning as accepted as a thing in physics, which I agree is a thing in physics, divine simplicity is not a part of that. It is not a part of the accepted definition of fine tuning anywhere in any physics textbook ever.
yeah, physics and physicists do not have any, expert sort of
On fine tuning, they do.
credentials on whether on the Kolmogorov complexity of the God hypothesis. It's more or less orthogonal to physics. It's a philosophical question.
I didn't say that. I didn't say. So I said that fine tuning, they have an expertise on. They have an expertise on fine tuning. Now you're adding something that is not the fine tuning physicists are talking about. You're adding something different. We have left the fine tuning and physics argument.
Okay, you seem to be under the impression that if I defend A, and in the process of defending A, I move to I appeal to something in some other area B, that I've completely departed from A. That's just not true. That's not how this works.
Let me try to.
I'm touching on both simultaneously.
Well, no. So this is called I forget which fallacy this is, but it's like a revolving domino fallacy, at least to circular reasoning. But in physics, they don't do that. Notice they don't go to philosophy. If they want to say general relativity is true, here's a novel testable prediction we can make to confirm it through the LIGO experiments. They confirm it. We're done. We don't need to reference philosophy here. We're done.
Okay, hold on. So this isn't a purely physics or i.e. physical argument. It's a philosophical argument that uses physics, to a substantial extent. But it's ultimately philosophical and metaphysical. So I have no problem just going back to philosophy and metaphysics at the points where I need to. That's completely to be expected.
Well, so I had a conversation with Robin Collins. Do you know who that is?
Of course, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, he admitted on camera that nothing in the physics indicates design. You have to add in a secondary argument, like the moral argument or some kind of property establishing argument of the God to include that it's higher probability. So I had this exact conversation with him, and he admitted, yes, absolutely, 100%. There is a one-to-one correlation to naturalism and theism in both the general sense and the particular sense. And so the next part of the argument that typically the academic philosophers will go to is they're going to say, here's some reason to think that a particular kind of God is more likely than any other kind or something.
Right.
What you seem to be doing is not that.
Right. That's what I was trying to do via simplicity. Like a version of God, the existence of God is simple in the sense that it takes very few bits of information to specify it. I mean, not a negligible number of bits, but not very many. Whereas I think the version of naturalism, like some imaginary version that I've never actually heard spelled out in any depth, and if you actually did spell it out, you'd probably win some kind of Nobel Prize, like on which the constants are fine-tuned, that doesn't have unbelievably high number of bits of information. Like that's, I don't think such, I'm not aware of any such theory of physics.
Well, it doesn't exist for God either. Simplicity fails for a number of reasons. One, it's not actually a thing, so it's an arbitrary distinction between a set of properties. It's not a thing. But that's a second argument. I don't care about that argument. Simplicity is just garbage.
No.
It's like arguing from Harry Potter.
I don't know. Just saying it's garbage and not even hearing out what I have to say seems a little premature. By simplicity, I'm referring to the minimal description length that completely captures every single property of the entity in question. So if the minimal, for God, it would be something like someone, a mind that can do all things and knows all truths that it is possible to do and know. Like that was a very simple sentence that specifies basically every part of God's abilities. If you tried to do the same thing for some naturalistic version of physics that would, render, fine-tuning likely, well, you're going to have a very tough road of it.
A law
I'm
of
afraid.
physics
Like
that makes fine
you're
tuning
going to have to come
likely.
up
I
with
just did
a
it.
bunch of
I just did it.
a bunch of equations that are going to predict what we see, and those are going to be inevitably very complex. If they weren't, then someone would have figured it. If they weren't unbelievably complex and taken an unbelievably large amount of space to fully specify them out, and some physicists would have done so already. Sadly, they have.
Well, no. So that's again completely irrelevant. The ability to express an idea through words or whatever is just irrelevant. It doesn't make a difference whether you can express an idea with words simpler or not. Secondly, the God concept is the least simple thing imaginable. If an all-powerful, all-knowing being who can create all of the universe is somehow simpler than an apple, then you have a dumb hypothesis. It's not even worth talking about at that point. There is no simplicity to an all-powerful being, and simply calling it simplicity based off of your arbitrary standards doesn't interest me. I don't care. Physics doesn't care until you can make a novel testable prediction to demonstrate that there is some simplicity law and that it conforms to your concept of simplicity. It's just you making shit up. And I can just say, based off of the Harry Potter magic law, it's wrong. And then, aha, it's over. Like this, it is not a serious argument. Simplicity is not a serious argument in physics. We don't care.
It is a serious argument. It's incredibly common to talk about simplicity in the philosophy of science and metaphysics in general in terms of something like minimal description length. And in fact, outside of science, Kolmogorov complexity is an incredibly important topic. But yeah, I think in epistemology, it's extremely commonly accepted that simplicity has something to do with minimal description lengths. And if you disagree, you're welcome to say why, but you can't just say, "Oh, that's garbage. I reject it."
Oh no, no.
And this
The
completely
part that's garbage is an all-powerful, all-knowing sky daddy with an invisible mind that's outside of space-time, which is supposedly simple because you can phrase it in a sentence. Nobody in science agrees with that. Nobody. It's a joke. It's a joke. Nobody thinks God is
I,
simple. That's stupid. If you think an
I
all-powerful,
don't see any
all-knowing
reason
being
to
is
believe
simple,
that.
it's a
But
joke.
yeah, I don't see two things. A, I don't see any reason to believe that. And B, I don't see any reason to trust them as the experts on the philosophical nature of simplicity and how it ties into Kolmogorov complexity.
Well, I don't care. So the reason I'm saying
In
this is a
philosophy of
joke and
science
not
or epistemology.
wait. So the reason I'm saying this is a joke and I'm not interested, I've had this conversation with academic professors like Rob Coons, who are actual experts in this. I don't care what you have to say on the topic. I've already hashed through this. This is a waste of my time.
I mean,
This
yeah,
topic, it's like
that's
it's like if you said my evidence for God is a magic farting pixie told me so. That's great. I'm going home. I don't care. So do you have anything that isn't garbage that you can present as what was it? What were we talking about before? Why did you bring up simplicity as a way to establish some
higher
particular
on God, and your gerrymandered versions of naturalism on which fine tuning is going to come out as more likely than not.
yeah, why are you selecting a particular kind of theism, not the general kind? And you said because of simplicity or something. They all have equal simplicity anyway. So it doesn't make a difference. That wouldn't give us a reason to select a particular kind of theism over general kind of
Oh
theism.
yeah, no. I mean, I just gave the definition of God. Like it's not the existence of God that's going to be the simple hypothesis that clinches it for theism. It's going to be the existence of God plus some attitudes that God has, which subtracts from the simplicity. It makes it a little more complex, but not that much more complex.
Well, that part I don't care
Whereas
about.
the
I don't
version
care. I do not care about that part. So
no, I understand. No, I get it. You don't care, and you're not willing to entertain any of the arguments. So it's like completely pointless. I think we agree on both of those things.
well, no. So the point is that I can just define naturalism as simpler than God by definition, no matter what, simpler than
Right.
God. Poof,
Yeah, but
I've
I'm not
made a
just
better,
that's
simpler
not what
way
I'm
than
saying.
yours is. That's it. It's done. It's just
Right. You just completely misunderstood.
no. You have misunderstood. The
It's
problem
it's
here
not
is
by
that
fiat.
wait,
Reasons for defining
it is by
simplicity
fiat. The
in terms
definition of
of
God is literally by fiat. You've made this shit up. There is no basis in physics for this. It's made up. It
I
is
have no
literally
idea
by
what it
fiat.
means to say the definition of God is by fiat. Like obviously all
100%.
definitions are by fiat.
Sure. Well,
But it's not the definition of God I was saying I was claiming like anything interesting about or claiming like is or is not a matter of fiat. Rather, I'm saying there are good reasons for thinking that something like Kolmogorov complexity, that is the amount of information it takes to express something, that's a good measure of simplicity. And then I'm saying on that measure, on that sort of intuitive measure of a simplicity, a human-friendly God is going to come out as simpler than some extremely gerrymandered, completely mysterious, abstract version of naturalism that you can't actually come up with. You
Well,
can't
no. So
actually
again, this is the
specify.
part that's just gibberish. No, saying an all-powerful, all-knowing sky daddy outside of space-time is in any sense simple is wrong. 100% wrong. No, it's not. I'm not.
Okay,
It's
well,
not
that's
worth
just
my
personal
time to
incredulity.
discuss that.
Not,
So I can just make a simpler argument.
no,
I can say that
you
the
you
concept
just
in
want to appeal
physics.
to your
No,
incredulity.
no,
That's
no.
all.
The concept in physics of a law that we haven't discovered yet, as it has a basis in reality, is simpler than a made-up sky daddy with no basis in reality. Now, when you're talking about reality, it is obviously complicated. Reality is a complicated thing. So to express things that have a basis in reality require more constraints than made-up magical metaphysical sky daddies. And I'm happy with that. I don't care at all. Everyone in science is going to agree with me. Yes, a law of physics existing is simpler than an all-powerful sky daddy who's outside of space-time. Not a thing. And so I would argue that in order to establish a criterion of simplicity, you'd have to say a thing that is only allowed to have principles or a combination of principles, particles, and laws that have been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination, and any additional properties that have not been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination is an infinite level of complexity that is a complete garbage waste of our time. And that is essentially what most scientists would agree to. And so I don't care about your simplicity property. Do you have anything that's serious and not a joke?
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry, Mark, I don't mean to interrupt. Apologies, right? Is there any maybe you could give some examples of like sets of propositions that conform to the principles you mentioned, and then I don't know, maybe TJump would agree or disagree, and then
I have no
we can
interest.
kind of see where the
I've already
divergence
debunked
is.
this. I've already debunked this. I want to move on to
Oh
an
yeah, no,
actual
but I'm just saying.
serious position. So simplicity is garbage. It's too ambiguous. It's undefined. There's no basis in physics. You can define it in any way you want. God is definitely not going to be simpler than laws of physics based off of Cognito complexity. Nobody thinks that except for people who are biased. And so that isn't an interesting conversation. I like the fine-tuning
Can
argument.
we give?
That's a fun argument because it's actually based in physics. And thus far, I've demonstrated a one-to-one correlation. And the only symmetry breaker he's presented is this simplicity garbage, which is just a definition game.
Could you,
Do you have
could
any
you
other
just
ways?
give? Because could we maybe give him a chance to get like maybe he could get his
No,
get like you
no,
to kind of follow
no,
some of his ideas.
no. I've already I've
I mean,
debunked
Mark,
this.
is there another?
Moved on.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, maybe
So
Mark,
I
is there
want
any
a
other
different thing other
kind of
than
approach
simplicity. Do you have
want to
any
take?
other kinds of symmetry breakers?
wait, hold on. Which person should I answer first?
Me. You should ignore
Uh,
Gabriel. Talk to me.
yeah, maybe. Well, whoever you feel like responding to, Mark.
Yeah, no, I'm going to lean on simplicity, and either you can leave or
Yeah, I'll
you can
leave. I'm
stay.
happy
In
to
which
leave. I've
case
been
I'm going
paid. I
to.
can leave.
Okay, do whatever you want, man. I'm
So
just saying that I'm not going to just
Well, I
like
mean,
give you your personal incredulity and ignorance of what physicists or philosophers of physics believe.
well, no, I've already told you what they believe. They don't accept your simplicity garbage. They do not accept the concept of a God being simple. They think that's literally a joke. It is as
They
much
do
of a
not have
joke
an
as
opinion
creationism. It is much as a
algorithm
joke
complexity
as
of God
astrology. I
versus.
don't care. So, do you have anything? Because so I've demonstrated what I attempted to demonstrate, which was that there is a one-to-one correlation between naturalism, simpliciter and general, to theism, simpliciter and general. And the only symmetry breaker you could provide is some definitional gibberish about simplicity, which is not accepted in physics. Is there anything in physics that you can provide that is a symmetry breaker?
All right, what is your evidence that physicists don't think that Kolmogorov complexity is a good
No. That
is a good way of
God, the argument was
complexity?
that God would be simpler under Cognito complexity than
No.
law of
You
physics.
said you can define simplicity however you want, and physicists don't accept the way
Yes.
that I'm
No.
trying to define
I
it.
specifically
Please tell me
said
what your evidence is. No.
no.
Please answer my question straightforwardly.
No,
What is your
because you're
evidence
straw manning what I
that
said. Listen to what I said.
complexity
Listen to
is
what
a
I
measure
said.
of simplicity?
Listen to what I said. Don't straw man what I said. Actually, listen to what I said. I said, God, as defined by the theists who are idiots, an all powerful, all knowing, non physical sky daddy, would not be defined as simpler than a law of physics in any model of simplicity that's accepted in any academic field. No. So that's the argument. It's not that Kolmogorov complexity is itself bad. The definition is that an all-powerful sky daddy is somehow simpler than a law of physics. That would be rejected by all physicists.
Okay, great. So at the very least, can we agree that even if I'm completely wrong in my conclusions, we can agree, I hope, that Kolmogorov complexity is a relatively decent measure of simplicity, at least at an intuitive level.
No, that's a separate topic. I would have to have a standard of simplicity that we actually define somehow relative to reality or something that has completely outside of the bounds of this debate. Maybe, who knows?
Tom, and depending on where you guys want to go, that's totally fine. But you remember, do you mind if you would like maybe give a positive case for atheism
I
as
did
well?
that
Do
in
you
the
think you could do
beginning.
that?
Yes, I did that in the beginning. He
Oh,
said he
okay.
agreed.
Did you? Oh, okay. You guys adequately. I didn't hear that was engaged fully. Mark, you felt like you gave a substantive response to that?
I mean, I suppose I mean, if I went further, if I don't know if you're trying to wrap it up, I'm happy to go on further. I mean, I'm going
No,
to
no,
try to
no.
argue.
As long as
I would,
Tom's amenable.
right?
Yeah, I said you can go forward. You can go forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to continue arguing that A, it is relatively commonly accepted that Kolmogorov of complexity is a good measure of simplicity.
I've already debunked
and
you on that.
B,
I don't care. So, could you have anything other than simplicity?
I mean, no, I think I'm gonna rest on that.
Okay, I'm happy to conclude there. I've demonstrated my
Okay, that
point
works.
successfully.
Tom, since there's still a little time left, would you be willing to engage either something different or another interlocutor
Sure.
in the meantime?
Sure. Did you hear me? Yes.
Okay, right on. Yeah. Just bear with me. Give me just a second here, if you would. Yeah, just 1 second. All right. We'll just see how this goes. Goon, go ahead, buddy. What do you want to say?
Yeah, TJump. I might have joined a little bit late. I heard that you had an argument in affirmative, right? That concludes that God doesn't exist. Can you present that argument?
Sure. Yeah. So if person A comes up with a thing they believe exists, object X, and the properties of object X are things that have an empirical basis, like hair, bipedal, dog, whatever, those are rational to believe. But if the person adds in properties that have no basis in reality, that have yet to be demonstrated, exist independent of our imagination, like miracles, magic, mythical creatures, paranormal, supernatural, UFOs, it's rational to believe that such a thing exists to the same degree that Santa Claus exists, which is not at all. And so if someone says they believe a sky daddy exists named Yahweh, it is rational to reject such existence to the same degree it is rational to reject the existence of Santa Claus.
Yeah, so I'm just going to ask how that follows, right, with regards to the evidence claim. So can you give an argument for that?
I just did. What are you talking about?
No. You gave like the claim, right? But I'm asking like for the argument for the claim, TJump.
I just did.
Okay, do you know what claim I'm referring to? I don't think that you can track the conversation right now, TJump. Do you know what claim I'm
All
referring
right,
to
next.
right now?
I'm done with this guy. Next.
All right, I gotcha.
I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if Mark's still there. Mark, is still there?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so like, I know, TJump, you're reluctant to engage on the point on simplicity, but I was just thinking, like, probably within that area, there may be like some point of convergence, right? Like, for instance, there could just be some compare
No,
or contrast.
I'm not interested in debating simplicity. Until simplicity can be
Yeah, no, you just
demonstrated as a
hold
property that
those,
exists,
like,
I have no interest in
no,
discussing
you
it.
just say no physicist agrees with me there, or agrees with, rather, he wants to say every physicist agrees with himself.
Well, no one
consistently.
is a generality for the consensus in that case, not literally every single physicist.
What are you basing that on? Can you give me some like poll or something?
I've spoken to physicists in the field and they have agreed with me that this is the consensus in the field. If you would like specifically to talk with them, you can go find out. But that is the view is that they agree. The consensus of physicists is that simplicity, in reference to a god, is an absolutely garbage idea. It's laughable. It's a joke. Pretty much every physicist I've talked to has said the exact same.
So my question for TJump is: so for TJump to believe in God, you would have to believe that he exists in the realm of physics.
No.
Right.
No.
So I even listened, and I think I kind of followed suit with Goon. You didn't really give an argument for why there couldn't be, in your words, a sky daddy.
Well, I never
I
said
mean,
there
I think it's
couldn't be.
rational.
That's not the argument. Like, there's no
Well,
logical
so that's what I'm
contradiction.
saying. So under what logic? Like, is it within the laws of physics? Like, under what science would you go, okay, there's a God?
And if you have novel testable predictions, that would be great evidence for a god.
Right. I mean, it's just weird. Like, you see examples of creation, right? Like, you
What?
know who your mom and dad are. You were made.
Sure.
Um,
That's not
it is
creation.
kind of
There's no
strange.
creation there. That's
It is
biology.
kind of strange. What I'm saying. Well,
That's
it
biology.
arguably is. It is creation.
No,
It took two
nothing, no
people to
matter
make
is
you,
created. Energy
right?
is not created or
Right.
destroyed.
So,
There's no creation there.
well, I'm not trying to get. I'm not going to get into word games with you,
What?
right? But you do have examples of us coming from something. Okay, so
Sure.
we'll
Agreed.
agree. We'll agree to disagree on creation.
Well,
Okay.
I agree we come from something, but
But
there's no evidence of
but
creation
as
here.
far as the debate is, does God exist?
Sure.
Right. So I heard why you don't think a God exists, but you didn't clarify under like what pretenses. And I think maybe that's why Mark's leaning on simplicity, is because you.
I don't
under
think
what
anything you're
conditions would you
saying relates
believe?
to what Mark was saying. But what is your argument?
Under what conditions would you believe? Well, I mean, I'm getting to the crux of the debate, what it's supposed to be about. Under what
No, you're
conditions
not.
do you believe a God would exist?
Novel testable predictions. So if you make novel testable predictions related to a God hypothesis and they are successfully confirmed, that would be evidence of a God.
So what would that look like?
If I died and met God after I died, that'd be great evidence. Or if Jesus
Right.
came back, that would be great evidence. If the things in Revelation happened as they're supposed to happen in the Bible, that would be great evidence. If we had a time machine, you go see Jesus, that would be great evidence. See him rise from the dead.
Cool.
Like any novel testable predictions.
Do you believe in historical Jesus?
Yes, I believe the historical Jesus existed,
Okay.
but there is no evidence
Okay.
of miracles.
No evidence of miracles.
Correct.
So I guess this is kind of weird because miracles are supernatural, right?
Not necessarily. No.
Well, it's unexplainable, right? Typically, like that's
No.
what a miracle is.
Literally, no. God did it is the
Well-
explanation.
Well, so that would be to me like a miracle, like that would be supernatural. Like earlier you mentioned Santa Claus. Santa Claus is magical, right? Like he
Sure.
flies around, he does supernatural things, right? And I think when you're looking at just the position that we are in as a species on the conditions that made the Earth, the solar system, the speed at what we're moving on a planet through space, we don't really have any other examples of another universe like ours per se. We've not seen a space fortress. We've not seen other people traveling through space. Don't you think this could maybe be a supernatural experience that we are on, like right now?
I
When we have no
literally
other example?
did not understand what you just said. So
Right.
there's no
So,
wait, stop. So you said there's no evidence of
Sorry.
other universes. Yes, that is correct. I don't know how that tracked into anything else you said in that sentence, but you are
Well,
correct.
we're going by the hard line. So it took you to see Jesus or for you to time travel to understand Jesus,
Well,
right?
no, that's
Well,
just an example.
Right?
That's just an example of a novel testable
okay.
prediction.
Well, so this is kind of what I'm getting at, though, right? Under the circumstances of like us being on a rock, speeding through space, and with rocks that are the perfect size, perfectly aligned,
They're not.
for us to have this debate, to allow us to exist and have this debate, right?
And
with the sun.
how do you think that
We've
indicates?
not observed.
How
but hear me out.
how do you think?
Please let me
that
finish my thought because I
indicates a
don't want
God?
there to be any more confusion.
Well, no, I don't. I
Right?
don't need to finish your thought. You're bringing up
I'm trying
fine-tuning.
to show you. I'm just trying to show you
Okay, stop.
an
Stop
example
talking.
of maybe
Stop
something
talking.
that is
Stop talking.
supernatural.
Stop talking. You're bringing
Yes,
up
Seth.
the solar system and the orientation of the planet in the Goldilocks zone, and you're saying this is supernatural. No, it's not. Literally not. There are tens of thousands of planets exactly like this in the Goldilocks zone all over the universe. We've mapped them out. There's
We don't know
literally,
that.
we do know this. We literally know this. There
We
is
do
a
not.
section of
We do
NASA.
not know this.
We do literally know this. There is a section of NASA that has literally
do not
mapped
know
these
that,
planets.
no.
We do. All right. So if you reject
We
that,
do
you're
not
just
know-
rejecting reality, and I don't have time for you.
Yeah,
So
you know what?
can go.
And I'm fine with that. And
You can go.
I'm fine with
That's
right
fine.
there. I would never assume
You can
to
move him.
know
You can move
what
him to the
other
audience.
planets
You
or
can
what
move
life
him to
is
the
on them.
audience.
You're correct. But the one thing I do know,
Can you move him away? Can you move him away now? Because I'm totally done with this guy. Go away.
the one thing I do know is that
Andrew.
we haven't seen any other
Andrew.
example. We just know us.
Andrew, can you move him forward, please? Goldilocks.
I'd like to ask you about. So it seems like you're amenable to of God.
Say that
I'd like
again?
to ask you about a thought experiment.
I'm sorry, I missed the first
know,
part.
to-
Could you say that again?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll try again. It seems like you're amenable to some empirical predictions of as a means of trying to argue for God.
Sure.
So I wanted to try running a thought experiment on you to see if you would consider this to be evidence of God.
Sure.
Let's say, sure. So, let's say that we, measure this has, forget about fine tuning for now. Let's say that we measure but let's, still focus on some of the constants of nature. Let's say we take the cosmological constant. Somehow we can, measure it to like, 1,000 decimal places. Like that's obviously unrealistic, but let's just go with me. Let's say that if we, we notice that if we write out the the decimals of the gravitational or cosmological constant in base 2, and we can interpret it as, and then we interpret, that binary string as Morse code. It's a string that says like, I am God, I left this message for you or something. Would you consider something that specific to be good evidence for God?
Well, because of numerology, probably not, because I think you can, using different mathematical assessments, you can essentially make any string of numbers say anything you want. But I think a better example would be like, if the Bible specifically said the world is 4.5 billion years old, and then we discovered it thousands of years later, that's evidence, yes. Which is why I think the best evidence for God is from Hinduism, because it actually got the number
Wait,
pretty
so
close.
I mean, I'm not talking about doing anything crazy to this binary string. I'm just saying interpret it as straightforwardly as Morse code.
Yeah, so I don't
Like,
know. I would
if it not only said, I am God, this is a message I left to you, but also encoded, let's say, a proof of some famous unsolved mathematical conjecture, would that be like surprising enough for you to believe that it probably came from at least some designer, if not, an omnipotent one?
potentially yes, but because of the studying I've done on numerology, I don't like transitioning letters and numbers into systems because it's arbitrary and you can make it do anything. So I'd want something better than numerology approaches, but
Well, I
potentially.
don't think numerology is the right way. Like, if we had to like plug it into some like unbelievably complicated mathematical function in order to get what we wanted to say, it's just like some really stupid binary string some very simple encoding scheme that we already had before we even had the capability of measuring, the fine tuning, any of these constants. Morse code is from late 1800s, I think, maybe early 1900s. Like, it would be quite an unbelievable coincidence if this existing extremely simple encoding scheme would give us something like a brand new proof of an unsolved mathematical conjecture. Wouldn't that be like at least a little bit, decent evidence for God's existence?
Well, the way I would phrase it is like if it just said the proof in the Bible, then yes, that'd be great evidence. But I think that every
Well, it doesn't have
every
to, well, not the proof
translation,
of the Bible. If it didn't say anything about the Bible, just said, "I am God, and here's the proof of the Riemann hypothesis," would that be enough to count as, minor evidence for God's existence?
potentially yes. But again, I think for every
Okay, great.
translation from a language, each separate translation adds infinitely many possibilities to make it work or make it into something meaningful. That's what numerology is doing. So I don't like that. So I would just make it simpler. Say, if the Bible said, here's a solution to the Riemann hypothesis, would it count that as evidence? Yes. Yes, I would. Yes. 100%.
Well, hold on. So it seems like you're a little ambivalent there, but you have at least some minor sympathy. But if you agree that, if we go down the route where you say, yes, it's at least a small amount of evidence for God's existence, wouldn't you just like run every single argument you've already run, on that? Like, couldn't you just say, listen, there's an infinite number of versions of naturalism on which, the value of the gravitational constant would encode in Morse code a proof of the Riemann hypothesis, and there's an infinite number on theism and an infinite number on both in which that's not true, so that couldn't be evidence for God at all. In other words, it seems like you're reasoning this
No, that would
entire
only
time. Now that
only apply to
maybe
post hoc
too much.
rationalization. So if it's a novel prediction of something we didn't know yet that was predicted and found to be correct, you wouldn't be able to use post hoc rationalization to find an alternative hypothesis that can explain the same data and have it be equivalent evidence for both. So like, even though there are infinitely many hypotheses that can all explain all data, problem of underdetermination, they are not equivalently justified by the evidence. So like, if one of the hypotheses makes a prediction and gets it right, that one gets more evidence than any of the others you can make fit the evidence after the fact. So if you have a prediction that this will happen, that you will find this pattern in the universe or something under my God hypothesis, and we discover it, that would be evidence of yours. And even if I can explain it with other hypotheses, it wouldn't make a difference.
Well, hold on. I might need to vary the example a little bit to get at what I'm trying to get at, but I'm not 100% sure I know exactly what you mean by novel or prediction. Like in this scenario, like this is such a in the scenario name where we can read out the proof of the Riemann hypothesis by reading the values of the fundamental physical constants. Like this is so specific and crazy that no human thought to predict this in advance. It's just something that we discovered and noticed.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
I
the
don't
part
think-
where numerology is like, well, we can discover lots of examples like that all the way. It's like there's I forget what the library is called. The library that has all possible variations of all words in it. I forget what it's called.
Library of Babylon, no, Library of Alexandria, I think.
Yeah.
The Borges thing.
Yeah, I think so. And so we can go and find in that library all kinds of crazy stuff. Like Jesus is the one true God or something in section QB and whatever hex is found. I don't really care about that. What I want is the novel prediction. I want you to predict something we don't know yet and discover it. And that would be good evidence.
Well, suppose right. So in that case, if I'm understanding you correctly, which I feel like I might not be, if no one had predicted specifically that we'd find this pattern, but we didn't found the pattern and suddenly knew the proof of the Riemann hypothesis, you would say that that's not evidence for God because no one actually thought to predict.
Oh, in the case of the Riemann hypothesis, yes, I think that would be good evidence if it actually had like a solution
Right.
that would count as a novel
And is
prediction.
that only because? Okay, got it. Well, what if the day before? What if we already knew the proof of the Riemann hypothesis? What if the day before we measured the constant and decoded it from base 2 or binary? What if the day before we had discovered a valid proof of the Riemann hypothesis? Would it in that varied scenario would it not be evidence for God anymore? Just because we already knew.
Like if it was a thing that pre-existed that had the solution prior to our knowledge, then it would still be evidence. So like if we discovered say we discovered the Riemann hypothesis and then tomorrow we discovered a manuscript that's 5,000 years old that had the solution written by God or whatever, that would still be evidence of God.
Okay. So when you say a novel prediction, it doesn't have to be literally novel, unless I'm misunderstanding you, which again, I might be. It doesn't have to be literally novel in the sense that it says something, says something that we didn't already chronologically know.
No, it has to be novel for
It
the
just has to-
individual who made it. So the individual who made it couldn't already know about it. So like if they already knew the answer, then it's not novel for them, and them being able to post hoc rationalize it isn't evidence. But like if there was a book 2,000 years ago that wrote DNA is double helix told to me by Yahweh, that would be great evidence of Yahweh. That's a novel prediction for that guy back then.
Okay, understood. But then in that case, couldn't I just say, listen, it's novel. It's whoever, A, measured the constants of life, and B, figured out the laws of physics on which they determined that varying the constants a little bit would, make life impossible. It was novel for them that, to discover that the universe is fine-tuned for life. So, I mean, we do get a novel prediction. Now you could of course, now we're getting back into the territory we were getting in before, where you say, listen, yes, it's a novel prediction, but it's also a prediction of certain versions of naturalism, just as many, in fact, as it is on theism. But then I can just say, well, in that case, you shouldn't, in the Morse code Riemann hypothesis case, you can say exactly the same thing. There's going to be an infinite number of naturalisms on which there's a novel prediction, as there is on theism. So I don't see how, how there's any asymmetry here.
Well, again, novel prediction is a person made a prediction or whatever. And so if that person has a hypothesis and makes a prediction and get it right, that hypothesis takes priority. So I don't see underdetermination means you can always explain all data, including novel predictions, by infinitely many hypotheses, no matter what. It's irrelevant.
Mark, do you mind if we just tag Shameless in here for a little bit, and then we can come back to it if we still have some time, because we don't have a whole lot of time left. So I was kind of hoping, or do you want to real quick? Or?
I mean, if you swap, obviously it's your room. You can swap Seamus in. I have a feeling.
Yeah.
Right. I have a feeling that if you do so, their dialogue, either one of them will leave, or their dialogue will take a long time. In which case, I'll probably check out. But if you are okay with pausing that for a while, I would continue to press on this line.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Go ahead. Go for a little bit here. More. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. No. I just don't. I think your argument from before, if you're taking this line about, what you're calling novel predictions, you're not really going to have a big disanalogy between, the crazy and extremely implausible thought experiment I give you and fine tuning. Everything you can say about one, you're going to be able to say about the other. Like they're both going to be novel predictions and to exactly the same degree, and not novel predictions to exactly the same degree. And they're both going to have an infinite number of compatible naturalistic versus non-naturalistic explanations to exactly the same degree. So if you think one of them is evidence for God, you should think that the other one is evidence for God.
Well, that part doesn't make any sense. So a novel prediction is a hypothesis makes a prediction before it knows the answer and gets it right. And that would be the defeater. That would be the one that's like, hey, this guy got it right. That's it. That's all you need. So if you're saying like in the case of the mathematical solution or whatever, like, I don't know on that one, it's not really relevant to what I would care about. But if you make a hypothesis and you make a prediction and you get it right, you get the evidence. There's your defeater.
Okay, so then help me understand. I measure the constants, I decode them, and I find that they encode a message from God that includes, or a seeming message from God that includes the proof of the Riemann hypothesis, even though the proof of the Riemann hypothesis in this case is already known.
Sure, as
All
long
right,
as it
what-
says,
can you tell me
I,
what the
God,
novel
give you
prediction
this
is?
answer, that's evidence of God. I'm happy to grant that. Evidence of God.
Okay, so the novel prediction here is God exists, you would say?
No, it'd be like the solution to the Riemann hypothesis before it was known.
Okay, wait, sorry.
So
I
a
just
novel
wanna
prediction
clarify.
is of a phenomenon. We have a hypothesis. The hypothesis is God exists. The prediction is if God exists, he'll write us a message with the Riemann hypothesis or something.
Okay, well, I can just simplify it. Like, let's suppose it didn't even mention God at all. It was just like, hey guys, it literally said, hey guys, here's the proof of the Riemann hypothesis, and gave
Okay.
it. Okay, would you count that as a novel prediction?
No.
Okay, so you wouldn't count that as evidence that our universe is designed?
Well, definitely not. I mean, the fact that the Riemann hypothesis was written into laws of physics doesn't necessarily mean the universe is designed one way or the other. It just means someone's messing with the laws of physics.
So, okay, just to be clear, I mean, even though I think the Riemann hypothesis should be enough, like it doesn't, it's not just the Riemann hypothesis. It literally says in English, hey guys, here's a proof of the Riemann hypothesis, and then gives an English, not just a proof, but an English language proof of the Riemann hypothesis.
So it would have to say,
You really don't
it would have
think-
to say, and I designed the universe, then that would be evidence of design. Yes.
Well, I mean, it's given that it doesn't seem possible to change the laws of physics from within, right? The constants of the universe, which, as far as we can tell, are completely unchanging from within. You don't think that it would be evidence that whoever set up the entire system and
No, literally not. It means
it
would just be evidence they manipulated that one law. The whole universe could have been designed or created prior to this person manipulating that one law. Just seeing if we just see a phenomenon, this law has been manipulated in such a way that it says this message. Would that be evidence the entire universe? No.
Then how would it help if it said I am God as well? Because like they could have just manipulated that too.
It could be, but it would be evidence they were God because they at least claimed they were God. So yes, that would at least be evidence they were God. Or if they designed the universe, they claimed to have designed the universe, that would be evidence they designed the universe. Yes.
Okay, well, it seems like you're appealing to the intuitions of physicists you talk to. I'd be really interested if you polled them and asked them if in this scenario they found this feature of say the cosmological constant or whatever, if that would be evidence of design. I would be willing to bet that a humongous number of people, a humongous number of them would say yes, obviously, even though of course it's completely unrealistic and we don't in fact find.
Right. So yeah, I would agree that that particular constant was designed or manipulated in such a way to produce those things. Sure.
Well, not just that, but that the universe was probably, or whatever processes governed, the core features of the universe were designed.
I think that one would be a stretch. It would still probably be some trivial evidence because it could be the case that that person designed everything rather than just that one particular law. But that may or may not be the case. So it wouldn't be as strong evidence as if it literally said, I designed the universe or something.
Sure. I mean, it might not be quite as strong evidence, but I think most physicists, even though I don't think in this case they're necessarily the relevant people to talk to, I think even they would say it's not maximally good evidence, but it's still pretty good evidence. Like this.
Yeah, that
is like
seems
a
rational. That
truly-
seems like if there was like a message written in the constants, you could probably infer that the universe was designed because there is a message written in the constants. That seems rational. Sure, I can count that as
Okay,
evidence.
great. So then let's try to run your argument from before on, in this extremely unrealistic scenario. Like there's still an infinite number of physical laws that would generate,
Sure, I'd say that
quote unquote message.
Well, I know what you're going to say. So I'd say that the probability of a universe producing this particular message being natural would probably be lower than the probability of a designer or the number of possible designers producing this message. Therefore, it's higher probability that a designer did it than one of the natural outcomes did it.
Okay, but I mean, the numbers are equal in both cases, right?
No.
There's an yeah, no, absolutely. There's an infinite number of gods.
No,
who
the percentage
believe
here
this.
is what matters. Again, the numbers don't matter. It's the percentage. The percentage
how do you-
of
how do you- how do you-
all possible designers, of the percentage of all possible designers, and of the percentage of all possible natural universes, the percentage that would produce this message is larger on the design hypothesis than the intelligent or the naturalism hypothesis, because there's less variables in the case of that would select for or against a message in the case of a designer than in the case of a natural hypothesis.
Yeah, there's not going to be any way for you to calculate percentages. First of all, percentage
It is. It
deals
is
with
actually
cardinality.
quite easy. Again, I went over this with Rob Coons. He 100% agrees with me on this. This one's totally easy. Totally easy.
Yeah, I'm incredibly skeptical that he agrees with you on that. Maybe he agrees with you on something and you're
But this
misinterpreting it.
is not
I'm
controversial.
skeptical that
This
he
is
would
not
say-
controversial. If we see a BMW,
Of course it's controversial.
no, it's not. This is not controversial. So if we
No,
see
I
a
just
thing
don't
that
think
we
you have
have
any
lots
idea
and
what
lots of evidence is made by a mind, like a message, and you want to say,
No,
is
no,
it
I
more
wanna stick
likely?
to the specific point.
Yes, like the message. That's what we said. The message. That was the
Okay.
point.
Okay, help me compute the percentage of gods that would lead this message versus the percentage of physical laws that would accidentally produce this message without any intelligibility.
True. So like
give me some sort of computation to work.
so like in the case of a designer, they have reasons to want to do something. So if a certain conscious agent has a reason to want to do something like write messages or whatever, then more of the gods will write messages than the universes because they don't have any kind of particular disposition to write messages. So since we know minds have a disposition to tend to write messages, more of the minds will likely write messages than something that has no disposition to write messages. So if the universes, which have no disposition to write messages, have less likelihood to produce them than the ones that have a disposition to write messages.
Okay, but there's an infinite number of possible minds that don't have the disposition to write any messages.
That's fine. It
Again,
doesn't
how do
matter.
you
The
compute
percentage is what matters.
What
So like all minds
Right.
share something in common. They're a mind.
So how do you, so if you have an infinite set and an infinite subset, you have an infinite set A and an infinite subset B, walk me through how to compute the percentage of B that
So
B
again,
has
if
in A.
minds have similarities. There are certain similarities that are true of minds that are not true of universes. And so of these similarities, whatever they are, if we have a mind created object versus a non-mind created object, the mind created object is more likely to have whatever these similarities are than the non-mind created object. And so like one of these similarities is going to be words, language. So even if it's the case that there are infinitely many natural universes that could produce words and language, the likelihood of them coming about by a mind is higher because all minds share a property. And this property, which is more prevalent in minds than it is in universes, will translate to objects, words. This is non-controversial.
again-
Non-controversial.
Again, first of all, you haven't justified the claim that it's more prevalent in minds, or rather the
Words
the
are not more
prevalence
prevalent
of
in
all-
minds than nature. Like really? That's
No. That's not exactly what I was trying to say.
that's my
The
argument.
prevalence-
That's my argument.
No. Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Please let me
Like,
finish.
it's
my
non-controversial.
question. I mean, essentially everything you're saying is non-controversial is controversial, and everything you're saying is
So
controversial.
who
is
disagrees that
non-controversial.
words are more prevalent in minds than not minds? Who tell me?
That's not what I was about to argue. What I was about to argue
That's
is
what
that
I said was
not the
non-controversial.
case-
So this is not an
Okay,
issue.
then I apologize. Okay.
Mark, do you mind if we give it a break in about 2 minutes? In about 2 minutes, we'll just give it a little break and then possibly come back if Tom feels gracious
Yeah,
after
that's
he
fine.
talks shameless for a little bit. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, 2 minutes is fine. Again, the prevalence of you have. I mean, I agree with you 100% that the prevalence of being able to use words is higher in minds than in non-living things. However, you haven't shown that the prevalence of wanting to use messages is higher in minds than not wanting to use messages.
Well, the wanting is irrelevant.
Moreover, hold on, I'm not done. You also haven't shown that the prevalence of wanting to use, of wanting to use words to convey messages is higher in minds than the prevalence of accidentally conveying messages as a accidental result of a bunch of extremely specific physical interactions is more prevalent
It
in
wouldn't be.
non-minds.
It wouldn't be. So, like in the case of the
Okay, you
mind's
have no way of
hypothesis,
quantifying
shush,
this
shush, shush,
whatsoever.
shush, shush. So, in the mind hypothesis, there are infinitely many minds who do it intentionally and do it unintentionally, and in the naturalism one, there's only infinitely many that do it unintentionally. And so, of the ones that do it unintentionally, there is a 1-to-1 correlation between the naturalism and the design and non-design versions. But there is also another subset in the design versions who do it intentionally. And so there's a 1-to-1 correlation in the unintentional products of this words in both mind and non-mind, but there's an additional set that do it intentionally in the mind set.
Right. I mean, of course I agree. There's a large, in fact, infinite subset of minds that do it intentionally. But I'm saying there's also an infinite subset of there's an infinite subset of non-mental physical
my God.
possible theories that do
Yes,
it
yes, I agree.
unintentionally.
I agree. So there's a bunch of minds who do it intentionally. That part we agree. And there's a bunch of non-minds who do it unintentionally. Agreed. But in the design mind hypothesis, there's also a bunch of minds that do it unintentionally also. So for every physical interaction that's done coincidentally, there is both a mind and a non-mind that does it. But in the mind version, there's more. There's more because there's also some doing it intentionally.
Yeah,
Can
this
you
is just
give
a
a lot?
quantitative error. Like you're adding two infinite sets and saying it's bigger than that's bigger than a third infinite set, and that's just not how infinity's at.
You
The sum
can
of two infinite
add,
sets is
you
going
can
to be
add
infinite.
infinites.
They're
No,
both infinite to
that's
exactly the same
literally relevant.
extent. They
No,
have the same
no,
cardinality.
you can add and subtract
Okay.
infinites just fine. There's literally no problem that some infinites are bigger than other infinites. This is not controversial
Yeah,
whatsoever.
of course, I agree, but you haven't shown that one has a larger cardinality than the other. You've
So
just
the
shown that
cardinality between section A of an unintentional nature producing the words and unintentional minds producing the words. So there's a mind, but it's unintentionally, accidentally producing these words. It's 1-to-1. There's exactly the same. Then there's another infinite set above
Yeah.
that, which is
Great.
the intentional ones, the intentional minds who intentionally do it. And so of the
Okay.
possible number of natural states that do it accidentally and minds that do it accidentally, those are the same. But there's more because there's another one of things that do it intentionally.
This is
Andrew,
a very
I know
good exchange.
Hold on,
This is a very good
Andrew.
exchange. Okay,
Andrew,
go,
I
go,
know
go.
you really want to. Andrew, I know you
Okay.
really want to end it.
Okay, yeah,
Or
yeah,
rather,
yeah.
to
Go.
pause.
Yeah.
I know you really want to pause, but like this is just
Yeah.
like a totally straightforward, like uncontroversial
Okay.
mathematical mistake. Like it's
Okay.
very, very, very easy to see that it's a mistake. And technical
Okay.
point, I'd like to highlight it. Like
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
just because you have a 1-to-1 correspondence between a set A and a subset and a set B, and you can embed B in some larger set C.
Yeah,
it doesn't
Hilbert's
follow
Hotel.
that
I don't
C
care. That's irrelevant to the
is
argument.
larger than A.
Literally irrelevant to the
No,
argument.
it's
So you're focusing on the semantics, which
okay.
is irrelevant to the core of the argument. The core of
No,
the
I'm
argument is sound.
focusing on exactly what you said, which
You're
is that there's a
you're
1-to-1
focusing on the
correspondence between
semantics,
two
which is
things.
irrelevant to the argument. Everyone can common sense
No,
understand
I'm
what I was
focusing on
saying.
your argument.
If you don't
I'm
understand,
focusing
I
on your
don't care.
argument.
I don't care. Everyone understood what I said.
Okay.
I didn't phrase it perfectly technically correct because I don't care. But what I said was perfectly valid.
It would be more
accepted by
accurate to say you
philosophers.
didn't phrase it correctly, or you didn't make a
You're
correct
focusing on the
argument.
semantics,
You
not the
made
core
an
of the argument. The
obviously
core of the
incorrect
argument was correct.
mathematical point.
Next person.
Okay. All right. So let's hold it for a bit. Mark, Tom, I appreciate it from both of you guys. That was invigorating. Shamos, are you there? Shamos?
Yeah, I'm here. Can I be heard?
Yeah, I can hear you, buddy. So, I mean, I don't know that Shamos was here earlier. Tom, what was can you give your argument again? It was pretty short and sweet for atheism.
It's as rational to reject God as it is to reject Santa.
You there, Shamos?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. What do you think about that statement? It's as rational to reject God as it is Santa.
I think that's going to depend on your commitments and your background beliefs, and it's going to vary individual by individual. To claim that that's some fact that's true for all people is something that I would think is absurd. And so I don't really know what you guys were talking about. I listened for a minute. It was a bit of a cluster, but it seemed like the classic when atheists, like, give me evidence for your God, let me sit up on the throne of judgment, and you provide me the evidence and let me bang my gavel and show you that I'm the true pillar of logic and reason, and like, obviously the next thing out of the internet atheist's mouth is like, he appeals to
do you have
like,
any evidence
oh,
or
I
not?
need,
'Cause
I need, I need some
stop. This
scientific
isn't.
prediction, right? It's
We're
something
not
that
interested.
caters to
Stop talking.
psychological
Stop talking.
security
Move
and
the audience.
scientism.
Move the audience.
And so,
move him.
Hold
Bye
on.
bye.
Hold
hold on, Duffy, I'm
Okay.
not done with
Move him. Bye bye. So again, I'm not interested in your preaching. If you don't have any evidence, then you have as much evidence as Santa, which is none. It's as simple as that.
All right, give him an argument, Seamus. Give him an argument.
No. What I'm saying here is that this whole thing,
Do you have
where
any
it's
evidence?
like, hold on, just calm down
No.
for a second,
Do you
buddy.
have any evidence? Yes or
This-
no?
Yeah, I do.
What is
I
it?
do, but I want to say
What
a
is
few
it?
things
I
first. I
don't
want to be
care.
able to say a few
I'm
things
not
and
interested in
comment.
your preaching. Give your evidence or move back to the stage.
I'm not going to be doing
Okay.
any
Can you
preaching.
move
I
him?
want to
Can you move
comment
him
on
away?
what I just saw.
Last chance.
Why are
Evidence or
you
kick him out.
a coward?
Evidence or kick him out.
What? So okay, so
Andrew,
you get to sit
Andrew,
on the throne
Andrew,
of judgment and
Andrew,
be the judge of
Andrew,
all that's
Andrew.
logical and reasonable.
Okay.
And unless someone
Seamus.
submits that to you in your
Andrew,
highness,
hurry
then
up.
kick him out of
Mute
the
him.
room.
Mute him.
I got
Get him off. Get him off.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right, Taryn, go ahead, buddy.
Oh, nice. Okay, well, thank you. I did have one small thing to add, that there is actually evidence for Santa, but it's actually not true that Santa is actually here, which is funny. So it's just a small point. One, I think there is evidence for God. Two, I think there's evidence for Santa, but it also shows in that there's evidence for Santa that just because there's evidence doesn't mean it's correct. I mean, I put out milk and cookies when I was a kid, and I woke up the next day and they were eaten, and there was a note that was addressed, says from Santa, and there were presents addressed from Santa under the tree that went there the night before. So that could lead you to think that someone did come in, eat the cookies, and leave me a note and put the presents under the tree. And in fact, they did, but it wasn't Santa, it was my parents.
Too much. That would only be evidence for Santa if it hadn't already been defeated by other knowledge of the fact that, your parents did it. So it's not actually evidence for Santa. Unless you're ignorant of the other evidence that it's of your parents.
It's still evidence for Santa. Like, evidence is just something that would lead you to think or be in a line with that being the case. It doesn't rule out that other things could also be the case, though.
In that case, it would. So, like, if you're a rational actor, it would be irrational to conclude or to be justified in believing Santa Claus existed based off of the cookies. You would, in fact, be a fool. So, do you have any actual evidence?
Or at least you could be wrong.
No, you'd be a fool. So if you literally know of the defeating evidence but choose to go against it, that's called a delusion. You'd be a fool. So do you have any actual
if you know of the defeating evidence.
That
Yeah,
is the criterion we are keeping with here. So the reason there's no evidence of Santa is because we know of the defeating evidence. So do you have any evidence of God that hasn't been defeated by other knowledge?
I wouldn't say so. Not the kind that you're looking for. But I just thought that it might be relevant to point out that
any kind. Do you have any kind that is not defeated?
It's just not really relevant as far as other people are concerned. It's usually just like someone went through an experience, but that's only applicable to them because they can't prove that they went through it.
How is that not defeated? So since we know of illusions, delusions, misconceptions, hallucinations, and how fallible the human brain is, how does the fact that you already know that not defeat that information as being evidence? Just like knowing your parents put the cookies there defeats it as evidence of Santa.
Oh, well, see, I know my parents put the cookies there. I don't know for a fact that my mom hallucinated anything.
Well, definitions of knowledge here are irrelevant. So there's no certainty. You don't have certainty your parents did it. You just have a probabilistic assessment based off of prior knowledge. So we have probabilistic assessment based off prior knowledge that the exact same probability that your experience was a product of delusion is the same probability that your parents put the cookies there. So how is that not defeated in the second case?
Wait, why is the probability the same?
Generalization. So we know we have a sufficient amount of data to conclude your parents put the cookie there. We have a sufficient amount of data that human brains are bad and have delusions, illusions, misconceptions, etc. And so we can conclude rationally that both have the same probability in general. Why would they not?
Well, because one's a very particular case. I know my specific parents put these cookies there. And another one's not specific. I just know human minds can be wrong about things.
So I know,
but I have no evidence to show that my mom did or didn't have these experiences.
I know your particular brain put the experience cookies there. So how is that different?
I don't understand how it's the same.
So
Like all of our experiences are made up by our brain. It's all hallucinations of sorts, but it's based on some kind of reality, or at least usually it is.
Sure. So your parents put the cookies there because there's a lots of abundance past data of evidence of how parents make cookies and put cookies there. Now we have equivalently as much past data about how brains fail when it comes to personal experience. You had a personal experience, so it's rational to conclude that in those cases your brain failed, just like it's rational to conclude your parents put the cookies there.
I see. I guess what I'm saying is the reason I believe my parents put the cookies there is because they actually told me that they did. It's not because
Well, that's just a piece of
anything
data.
else.
So a piece of data your parents told you they put the cookies there is presumably we have a reliable basis of evidence, which is your parents. They told you because they're the ones who did it. That's trustworthy evidence. Likewise, we have trustworthy evidence in the case of studies of how brains work. There are tens of thousands of fallacies, biases, illusions, delusions, misconceptions that have been proven to exist in the brain to cause such hallucinations that are extremely common. And when these hallucinations are tested, they are almost always proven to be, pretty much 100% of the time, figments of their imagination, not only for gods, but for fairies and leprechauns and ghosts and sky daddies, etc. And so in every case, it has been proven, just like in every case that we've tested to find out who put the cookies there, it wasn't Santa, it was your parents. In every case that we tested the psychological phenomenon, it wasn't ghosts, it wasn't leprechauns, it wasn't fairies, it wasn't God, it was the brain. And so there is a one-to-one correlation there of psychological phenomenon and the evidence we have of it, and cookies and the evidence we have your parents put them there.
Mm-hmm. So by that thinking, it sounds like that no amount of personal experience would matter. It would just serve as further evidence that people hallucinate and get things wrong.
In the case of miracles, magic, mythical creatures, the paranormal, supernatural, and UFOs, yes.
See, there we go. So I don't have any other evidence.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
There we go. What's up, Sonny?
Wow. Hey, what's up, guys? Okay, TJump. I guess like first questions, just so I can understand it. Do you think that like when you have like a claim and you're trying to justify it, do you think that's gonna fundamentally go back to your Cognito thing?
I have no idea what you're asking.
Okay, so when you have like a claim and you're trying to provide some sort of inference for the claim, do you think that like stream of justification is going to go back to your Cognito? Is that, do you get what I'm saying? Do I think
You
therefore
can
I
make
am?
it do so, yes.
Okay. So I guess my question would be like, the claim that you exist, right? That's going to be a claim. Do you have some sort of inference to justify
No, it's
that?
a description. It's a description of an experience.
Well, that's another claim. That's just kind of to repeat the claim.
Sure,
right?
but the claims don't
You're
matter.
just
So again,
saying
there's
that.
an experience. There is an experience. It literally exists. This is not a claim.
Well, that's just to do it again. Yeah, it is a claim.
No,
You're just
no.
saying it exists.
I'm making
Yes.
a claim to describe a thing, and the claim is a reference, is referencing the thing. There's a thing there, which is an experience, and I'm making a claim to reference the thing, but it's not referencing another claim. It's literally referencing an object that exists. So it doesn't actually rest on a claim.
Well, it does, because
Does
by
not.
referencing the object,
Does not. I've already
by
just debunked
referencing the
this.
object, wait, really quick. So by referencing the object, you're assuming the object exists, right?
No, it's literally an experience.
No.
No, you don't assume anything.
Okay, so there's nothing implied by the statement I exist. There isn't anything implied by that.
I'm having an experience, and
description.
this experience requires no assumptions. It's literally a thing that literally exists. There are no assumptions that cause the thing to exist. It literally is just a thing that exists. Now, in the sentence, in the descriptive sentence, which doesn't matter, I assume English because I'm speaking to you in English. So that's an assumption. There's all kinds of assumptions in my sentence, but the sentence is irrelevant. The object of existence is there independent of all assumptions and all definitions and all claims.
Well, I take it to just be like an unjustified claim then. Just an axiom. When you say you exist.
the sentence, but again, the sentence is a reference to describe an object, which is the experience. So debunked.
Right. When you say something like, yeah, it's just a sentence, but I really am existing, it's just describing that I'm
No, no, no,
existing.
an experience.
You say
There's
something
an
like that,
experience.
that's going to be a claim.
Experience. So like I'm seeing a TV.
Yeah.
This is a thing.
The whole
This is a thing.
experience thing.
It exists.
Yes.
It's
That's
occurring
what I
in
mean. So when
reality.
you
It's
say
a thing, right? So the
yes,
words don't
once again,
matter. All words. I can
we
make
keep
up any
repeating the claim.
words to describe that, but it doesn't matter. None of the words matter. I'm not assuming I exist. I'm not making a claim I exist. None of that is happening to cause
Oh,
my experience. None of it.
Well, I'm not saying it's happening to cause your experience, but you are saying you're making the claim that it's happening.
Right. So after I have the experience, I then use words to describe it. Yes.
Right. That's just another claim, though. You're just assuming that you are having the experience.
No, it's not an assumption. It's an event that's literally occurring. Assumptions don't cause events.
Oh, God.
So there's an event there. It's happening, and assumptions just don't matter. It's irrelevant.
Yeah, what you're saying, you keep repeating
All
it.
right,
You're
so
just
next,
saying,
I've
no,
debunked him. Next.
Okay, all right.
Next.
Have fun, TJump.
All right, Andrew, was there anything else for me here? I don't know what the format is.
Yeah, last person coming up, and then you should be able to finish it out with Tom. Are you there, Yahweh? Oh, I invited Yahweh.
Here. I'm here.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, buddy.
So, Santa Claus and Sky God, completely agree. I want to ask first, TJ, is your main contention with the God of Abrahamic religions presupposed by Catholic or Christian doctrines, however someone wants to phrase it?
No, any kind of God, it's fine.
So any supernatural, any non-physical experience, entity, existence, period?
Sure.
So what do you call physical?
A description of the properties of things that exist as far as we know.
Okay. Beyond a definition?
What? I don't know what that means. Matter and energy in motion?
Matter and energy in motion. Good. What is matter?
Energy.
Energy manifested, right?
Sure.
Well, I only say that from the understanding of molecular physics, how everything is nothing but atoms vibrating closely together and no atom is truly touching, right?
Fields, but sure.
Yeah. But just pretty much energy manifested, compressed, just manifested.
Yeah, everything is energy.
Now,
Energy
what is the
everything
term
is
energy?
Yes.
Where did that? Oh, perfect. If you can agree on that, perfect. So then everything has what you would call a base non-physical existence.
No, energy is physical.
Right? How is energy physical?
E equals MC
If we
squared.
just dictated that, and the physical is energy. No, if the physical is energy manifested,
energy and mass
can't be the
are
physical.
both physical. Energy and mass are both physical. E equals MC squared. Energy, mass, both physics, both physical. Like in physics, they study mass and energy.
That's
It's
why
not
I'm trying to get your
physicists
base
are like,
definition on what physical is. That's fine.
the things studied in the
base
field of
understanding
physics.
of what physical
The
is.
things studied in the field of physics. Physical.
That's what you call the physical.
It's what physicists call the physical.
So where does the physical reality come beyond the definitions of the minds who came up with them?
That makes no sense. That sentence
Is a rock not physical until someone does it take someone to study a rock to make it physical?
So the there were lots of hypotheses of physical realities and non-physical realities. The models of reality that made progress in the field were the ones that hypothesized everything was made of physical reality. Those made successful novel predictions. The successful novel predictions were confirmed, which then vindicated the hypothesis of physicalism. So it's not that we defined it as physicalism, it's that things, the hypotheses that were only based off of principles, particles, and laws in motion with no extra goop out there like the supernatural, are the ones that made all of the successful predictions. And so those hypotheses are the ones that are accepted as true.
Okay, that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
What I'm stating is that energy is only called physical, yet it's the base reality of all that we call physical. It's the whole thing. I'm pointing out the energy. Everything is energy.
Yes.
Everything operates within energy, and everything is made up of energy.
Yes. So physical
Now,
reality is made up of
okay, so yeah, there's a substance
Yes.
and there's
It's physical. It's physical substance that makes up
what?
everything. Yeah.
No, it's only physical because it's
You go argue that with the physicists. I have no interest. Like if it's studied in physics, it's physical. Energy is studied in physics, therefore it's physical. If you disagree and you think you can revolutionize the field of physics,
that
go ahead.
is hiding
Go
behind
ahead.
definition.
You can go bother the physicists.
Well, what if I classify energy as spirit?
If you make novel testable,
No, I can
you can do
classify
that. You can do
energy
that.
as spirit.
If you
It's
do
just
that,
been
if you
relabeled
do that, and you make novel testable predictions that successfully revolutionize the field, you will be given a Nobel Prize, and you will be correct. Go for it. Have fun.
that you know, and anyone else knows that is absolutely not
That
true.
is literally
You'll
the
get a
case.
Nobel
That is
Prize based on what they want to
literally the
promote.
case. So Einstein said that time literally bends. Lots of philosophers got very upset and said that was stupid. And then he made novel predictions about how you can measure time dilation. They were confirmed to be correct. And then everybody was like, damn, Einstein is right, even though we hate this idea of time, which is a philosophical concept, literally being able to physically bend because it's a physical object. He got it right. So we have to grant he's correct. Einstein wins, we lose. That's just how physics works. You make novel predictions, no matter how silly they are, you get it right, you win, everybody else loses, including spirit goo. If you want to argue for spirit
Perfectly
goo, go for it.
perfect fine. No, I don't classify spirit as goo or anything like that. The same idea you have of energy and how everything is comprised of energy and exists within energy, is made up of energy, is the same thing of what I say spirit is and what spirit is.
Great.
Everything exists within spirit. Everything is made out of spirit. That's what dictates anything to be the divine or to be the one that is one above all that is one.
That is a great hypothesis.
Would have to be the source,
Phenomenal.
substance, limits and bounds of
Phenomenal.
all
That's great.
things exist
That's great.
within.
That's great. So it's a great hypothesis.
That's a hypothesis,
Yes.
and here's the evidence.
Wait.
There's a
Don't
threefold.
tell me.
There's
Don't
a
tell me. Don't tell me.
threefold
I don't want.
pattern that
Don't tell me.
exists.
Don't tell me the evidence. Write it in a physics paper. Publish the physics paper. Get Nobel Prize, and I will just bow in awe of how correct you are.
It already has been published. It already won up to physicists and everything. This is not something new.
Okay.
And no one has disproven it. There is information like that out there, and just because a man hasn't come upon it does not mean it doesn't exist.
So it doesn't
just
matter. It doesn't
exist
matter if
for
it's been
him.
disproven or not.
And if you
Doesn't
want to say
matter.
you don't want to hear the evidence, then there's no point in coming up and talking and trying to talk to people who are trying to present you evidence.
So-
When someone comes to present you evidence and you say you don't want to hear the evidence.
So you don't need to disprove something to make it irrational to believe. There just needs to be an alternative hypothesis that works significantly better. So like if you have a model that never makes progress in a field, and there's a different model that makes all the progress in the field, the only rational thing to do is to believe the model that's making all the progress. So what I need from you is what progress you are making in the field of physics to tell us about the fundamental nature of reality.
Why are you on here having a debate or a conversation with anybody if that's your stance?
Well, that's my stance for physics. So if you say you know something more fundamental about energy than the physicists do, then you have to compete with the standard of evidence that the physicists use because they're the ones making the progress.
Oh, but the debate that's ushered tonight is, does God exist?
Right. Well,
If you, in your mind, want to separate God from physics, then that's you.
what is that?
But I'm
That has
here to
nothing
tell
do with what I
you that
said.
for God to be God, physics, all of it has to be a part of him.
That literally makes no sense.
So
I mean,
the only
if
way
you're a
someone can come and
pantheist,
tell you
sure,
about
sure. If you're a
God,
panentheist, sure, I don't care though. If you want to say that energy
No.
isn't
No,
physical,
see, now you're evaluating. Now you're evaluating based on spiritual or different kinds of understanding that you have encountered with,
but
instead of just encountering somebody speaking to
oh my
you.
God,
You're basing
God,
right
oh my
before the
God.
person talks what you have already heard, and thinking that it all is going to exist within that realm.
So, panentheism, the definition is that the universe is a part of or included in God. That's just what the word means. It's not like this is magic, but
No, it's not.
if you can go argue that with Google. Go to Google.
Pantheism is where
No.
each part of the universe represents a specific god within a totality.
No, panentheism, P-A-N-E-N, panentheism,
You should go look up what the pantheists out in Rome thought
not
and what they
not
believe.
pantheism. Pantheism is P-A-N theism. Panentheism, P-A-N-E-N-T-H-E-I-S-M. Panentheism. Google definition. Panentheism. Pan means all, in, en means inside of, theism, in God, all
All right.
in God, all in.
Yeah, we don't have much time left. We don't
Okay,
have
then I'll
much
get
time left.
to it.
Well, quickly,
Jump.
if you'll just go ahead and, buddy, go ahead.
Of course. The whole problem is I'm not saying that this creation is a part of God or is separate from God or anything. I'm saying that he himself manifested into this creation. And thus this creation has a makeup which indicates that it came forth from something because it has a makeup. Whether or not you know that makeup, you have a threefold makeup. Your body is in three chambers: a head region, a chest region, and an abdominal region. The chemical structure of everything is a proton, neutron, electron. Three states of matter. Everything exists within a threefold makeup. There is a makeup within life itself that speaks forth to something else's makeup, which it came forth from.
But no, we're not in three segments. Ants are in three segments. Humans are not in three segments. There's animals with 10 segments and 12 segments.
Yes, you are. You have three regions of the physical body.
But that's dumb.
There are three regions of the physical body with
that's
7 major functions, in which
literally
those functions operate within those 3 major parts.
Literally dumb. But your original statement was that energy isn't physical.
You have
Your energy.
You don't know anatomical science.
So your original argument was energy isn't physical. That one you're gonna have to take up with the physicists. Like if you want to argue that one, go take it up with the physicists.
All right, Yahweh, we're gonna leave it there, my friend. I appreciate you, buddy. Go ahead, Mark.
I am going to go eat dinner, so I'm gonna peace out. See you guys later.
Oh, okay. You out? Okay, Tom.